The First World War had a devastating impact on Australia. The newly formed nation of fewer than 5 million people lost more than 60,000 men. But the stories of bravery and mateship were nation-defining. 6 young Tasmanians have recently returned from a tour of Western Europe and Turkish battlefields, a trip that they'll never forget. The scale or the sacrifice of those men. It might be almost a century ago and a long way from the trenches and battlefields of World War I, but 6 young Tasmanian students are making sure the sacrifice of so many is not forgotten. Remembrance Day last year was particularly memorable for them. They were announced as the winners of the Frank McDonald Memorial Prize. The Year 9 students had won a trip to France, Belgium and Turkey to follow in the footsteps of World War I soldiers.
I see it not as a junket for the students, I see it as developing the community leaders of tomorrow.
Phil Pike was announced as the RSL representative.
They really believed in what they were doing, that it actually meant something going to the Western Front and to Gallipoli.
The Frank McDonald Memorial Prize is a joint initiative between the RSL and the state government, named after Tasmania's last World War I veteran who died in 2003 at the age of 107. Frank McDonald belonged to the 40th Battalion, the only all-Tasmanian battalion of the Great War. In April this year, the students toured the significant battlefields of the Western Front and Gallipoli.
And what was really interesting to me was seeing these young students from the first time we met them in November last year on Remembrance Day, right through as they went through their research, the number of times we met during the phase in the lead up to our trip, and actually watch them going through the trip and just grasping the enormity of what attritional warfare actually is.
He died of wounds.
Each student chose a soldier to research and followed their path through the war. Mr. Pike filmed many of the teenagers' experiences on the trip.
I stood in a military cemetery in rural France, and one of the young students, Jessica, had just completed sharing her research, and she was quite upset over the fact that she'd finally finished her journey at the grave of her soldier.
He was in the same company and battalion as my great-grandfather, and he was in my great-grandfather's diary. They ended up in hospital together, so this is very personal for me, a bit emotional at the moment, yeah.
Each soldier had a connection to the teenagers in some way.
So there wasn't any rules around how the soldiers were chosen, but it was done in a way that obviously it was very personal to each of the researchers as we went through that journey.
Scott Bowden followed the path of William Albert Hammond, a founding student of his school.
It was good that we did because it gave more of a personal connection and more significance and importance to the trip, and allowed us a greater understanding of the personal individual stories of those soldiers.
The stretcher bearer was mentioned in dispatches for his gallantry under fire and devotion to duty. On the Western Front in May 1917, Private Hammond died from shrapnel wounds to the neck.
He died at the age of 20, so really essentially not much older than me, and when he enlisted in the army he wasn't much older than me either. And it was only down the road at Claremont, which isn't far from home and isn't far from the school. So I guess it made things more realistic, and yeah, it gave me more of a personal connection to the whole experience.
Scott says rather than just reading about it, physically being there has given him an increased interest in history.
Flying all the way over from Australia and going to visit the gravesite of a Virgilian, someone that went to the same school as me, and someone that lived in the similar area and the same part of Tasmania as me, and knowing what he went through, and him being one of the many Australian soldiers and one of the younger soldiers to sacrifice their life in what was an event that helped shape the identity of our nation was something pretty special.
Phil Pike's soldier also died in the fields of France.
Captain Margetts died at Pozieres, so he survived Gallipoli. He had a very interesting time, journey to Pozieres. He was with Captain Joseph Layla, the son of Peter Layla of Eureka Stockade fame, and on that first day at Gallipoli, they went as far as Baby 700 and held ground there, and that's as far as the Allied forces ever got in the Anzac campaign.
Captain Margetts was in the 12th Battalion, which was half Tasmanian.
Well, the significance of the battalion to me is it's a battalion in which my father has served, and I served as a soldier, as an NCO, and again as an officer. So the 12th 40th Battalion is quite near and dear to me. You can sense us still there, but you can sense they're at peace.
It was the first overseas trip for 15-year-old Emily Pickett from Devonport High.
Captain Charles Augustus Littler. I chose him because he was a local Devonport boy. He grew up in Devonport, and his grandson lives in Forth, so it was easy to get in contact with family and find out a lot of history. And he was in charge of all the beaches at Gallipoli with the supplies coming in and out, and he was also the last Anzac to leave the Gallipoli shores as well.
Captain Littler then went to the Western Front.
I didn't expect it to be as emotional as what it was after spending a lot of time researching at home and going and see his family and learning about not just his war history but his whole family history as well, and then to finally get there and be able to sit there and, you know, lay the poppy and sit there and thank him, it was indescribable, really.
His name sits on the wall at Villas Bretonner alongside 11,000 other Australians with no known grave. It was there the group spent Anzac Day.
This is an Australian service, so it will be in English with some French elements.
The journey finished at Gallipoli, a place with a special resonance for many Australians, as where the nation lost its innocence and helped define modern Australia.
In Gallipoli, we lost 8,730 Australians there, but out of that 8,700, and the cemeteries we went to, there were less than 500. And as I stood up there on Lone Pine, looking back down towards the beach, I realised that in those gullies and ridges and in the thorn bushes and all that, they're still there. No marked grave, the whole place is just one big grave.
Emily Pickett regularly plays the bugle at services across northern Tasmania. This time she got to pay tribute on the beaches of Turkey.
Being on Gallipoli and standing on the shores, and I played the last post there, and just to hear the water lapping up, you know, it was so peaceful, but, you know, it was once a war zone, you know, a place of sacrifice for these men, and to stand there looking up at the cliffs that they faced, you never imagine how they got there and why they did it.